Welcome to Dolphin Dive Daily, your go-to spot for everything Miami Dolphins. If you bleed aqua and orange, hit that subscribe button and join the pod. You know, every single year around this time, the NFL rumor mill starts spinning faster than a Tyreek Hill slant route. We're less than 2 weeks away from the 2025 trade deadline. And as always, the media, the insiders, and the armchair GMs are lighting up social media with talk about who's getting shipped where, who's untouchable, and who's secretly packing their bags behind closed doors. But here we are again, and somehow, Jalen Waddle's name is still being thrown out there in trade speculation. And honestly, at this point, it's starting to feel ridiculous. Why? Because if you actually take a step back and look at what's happening in Miami, trading Waddle would make about as much sense as benching Patrick Mahomes for Blaine Gabbert. This week, ESPN released its list of the top 25 trade candidates before the deadline, and sitting there at number 2, right behind Cincinnati's Trey Hendrickson, was Jalen Waddle. You read that right, the number 2 spot. Now, here's the funny part. Even the ESPN analysis that put him there basically admitted that it's not going to happen. They said the Dolphins aren't planning to move him, that he's a cornerstone piece, and that teams are only dreaming about getting him. So why is his name even on the list? Because, as usual, teams want what they can't have, and reporters need something juicy to write about. Let's call it what it is, pure speculation for clicks. Sure, the Dolphins are sitting at a miserable 1-6 record right now. And yes, there's every indication that major changes are coming for this organization. But moving Waddle would be the definition of short-sighted. You don't rebuild by trading away your best young offensive talent. You rebuild around them. Jalen Waddle isn't some overpaid veteran eating up cap space. He's 26 years old, still entering his prime, and signed to one of the most team-friendly contracts for a receiver of his caliber in the league. That's not a player you move on from. That's a player you build around when you're trying to climb out of a hole. Let's put the numbers in perspective here. Waddle's cap hit for 2025 is only $8 million. $8 million. For context, that's less than what a mid-tier slot receiver like Hunter Renfrow was making 2 years ago. Then in 2026, his cap hit rises modestly to $11.7 million. Still manageable, still a bargain for a player who can give you 1,200 yards and 8 to 10 touchdowns when used properly. Then yeah, in 2027, that number skyrockets into the 30s, but that's also the point where the guarantees expire. Meaning the Dolphins will have all the flexibility in the world to renegotiate, restructure, or even move on if things really go south. Which, by the way, is not happening right now. So from a front office standpoint, this deal is perfect. And that's exactly why these rumors don't make sense. Because you don't trade a player who's affordable, dynamic, and productive just because your team is losing. You trade aging veterans, expensive contracts, or guys who no longer fit your timeline. Waddle isn't any of those things. He's literally the kind of player you dream about keeping when the reset button gets pressed. He's the foundation you keep stable while you fix everything else that's falling apart. But of course, every time a big-name player pops up in trade talks, people lose all sense of logic. We've seen this before. Remember when people were convinced the Chiefs were going to move Chris Jones in 2023? Or when every offseason headline was about the Cowboys shopping CeeDee Lamb? It's like clockwork. The moment a team starts losing, the media starts creating fantasy scenarios where every talented player magically becomes available. The Dolphins' poor start has opened the door for wild theories, and Waddle's name just keeps getting tossed in there because it sounds dramatic. Let's be real here. Unless someone calls Miami with a Godfather offer, something like 3 high draft picks and maybe a young starter, this conversation shouldn't even exist. It's like what happened with Laramie Tunsil a few years ago. Houston came in with a mind-blowing package, and the Dolphins simply couldn't say no. But outside of a deal like that, moving Waddle would be insane. He's a top 20 receiver in the league, and he hasn't even peaked yet. With Tyreek Hill drawing double teams every week, Waddle remains one of the few players who can break a game open in a single play. And if the Dolphins are truly planning for the future, they're going to need that explosiveness when the roster inevitably turns over next year. Now, let's also talk about what Jeremy Fowler from ESPN actually said, because it's important. His words were, "The team does not plan to trade the player, but interest is there." He even added that Waddle's contract is reasonable for a high-end receiver these days. Translation: teams are calling, Miami's answering the phone, but no one's offering anything worth taking seriously. That's all this is. Interest doesn't equal action. Every GM in the league calls around this time of year. It's just part of doing business. And when you've got a talented player like Waddle on a great deal, of course people are going to ask about him. It's like walking by a Ferrari with a for sale sign and still asking, "Hey, what's the price?" Even though you know you can't afford it. Now, shifting gears a bit, that same ESPN piece had Jakobi Meyers listed as the 5th best trade candidate, and honestly, that one makes sense. Meyers asked for a trade before the season started, and his situation in Las Vegas has been rocky at best. But what caught everyone's attention was that ESPN listed the Dolphins as one of the top fits for him. And let me tell you, that's where I had to pause. Because the idea of Miami adding a veteran receiver right now, when they're staring down the barrel of a rebuild, doesn't make much sense. It's not about Meyers' talent. The guy can play. It's about timing. If the Dolphins are really about to enter a transition phase, the last thing they should be doing is trading draft capital for a player who's going to be an unrestricted free agent next offseason. That's not smart business. You don't give up picks for short-term help when your long-term plan is in flux. You hold your assets, stockpile draft picks, and give your front office flexibility. So yeah, as wild as it sounds, trading for Meyers right now might make even less sense than trading away Waddle. But one thing that did make sense in that ESPN article was the mention of JAELAN Phillips as a legitimate trade candidate. Now that's a name you can put in the conversation. Phillips is in his 5th-year option, his contract is expiring, and while he's talented, the injuries have piled up. If Miami isn't sure about committing to him long-term, moving him before the deadline could be a smart move. He's young, productive when healthy, and could fetch a solid return, probably more than Bradley Chubb or Matthew Judon at this point. And in a rebuild scenario, that's the kind of move that aligns with logic. Sell high, recoup assets, and reset the cap sheet. But that's what makes the Waddle rumors so frustrating. Because unlike Phillips, Waddle's situation isn't complicated. It's clear. He's healthy, under contract, and still improving. The team's offensive identity, especially if Mike McDaniel sticks around, is built on speed and spacing, and Waddle is central to both. Even if the Dolphins clean house, fire the GM, or bring in a new coaching staff, there's zero reason any of those moves should involve moving on from your best young wideout. That's not how you rebuild. That's how you start from scratch with no foundation. And look, I get it. Fans are restless. The season's been a disaster. The offense hasn't clicked the way people expected, and Tua's future looks more uncertain than ever. When things fall apart like this, people start looking for something, or someone, to blame. But shipping off your young stars isn't the answer. If anything, keeping Waddle gives you stability in a storm. You can fix the offensive line. You can draft a new quarterback. You can retool the defense. But good receivers, especially ones who fit your system, your locker room, and your salary cap, don't grow on trees. So if you ask me why Jalen Waddle's name is still out there in trade speculation, the answer's pretty simple, because it sounds exciting. It gets clicks. It gives fans something to argue about on Twitter. But from a football perspective, from a business perspective, it doesn't hold up. Miami might be broken right now, but they're not stupid. And trading Waddle would be the kind of move only a truly desperate or clueless front office would make. At the end of the day, rumors are just noise until someone actually picks up the phone and makes a real offer. And until that happens, Jalen Waddle should be right where he is, in Miami, wearing aqua and orange, ready to be part of whatever comes next. Whether the Dolphins bounce back or hit the full reset button, he's one of the few pieces they can't afford to lose. Because in the NFL, talent is hard to find. Cap-friendly talent is even rarer, and young, explosive, game-changing talent? That's priceless. Still with us? Then show some love. Hit that like button and let us know in the comments. What's your take on the Fins this week? Alright, so picture this. It's one of those wild NFL nights where the league feels like it's running on pure chaos. The kind of night when your phone keeps buzzing and you don't even know which notification to open first because something big just went down. And this time, it's not just any move. It's the kind of trade that hits you out of nowhere and makes you sit up in bed at 2 in the morning asking, wait, what did they just do? Because yes, folks, JAELAN Phillips, the Miami Dolphins' explosive edge rusher, the former first-round pick, the dude who was supposed to be the cornerstone of their defense for years to come, has reportedly been traded in a last-minute deal that nobody saw coming. Now, before we even get into the details, let's take a breath here, because this isn't just a simple player-for-player kind of situation. This feels like one of those moves that have layers, drama, strategy, maybe even a touch of desperation. We're talking about JAELAN Phillips, a player who came into the league with all the promise in the world. The guy was a five-star recruit, played at UCLA before transferring to Miami, and when the Dolphins picked him up in the first round, fans thought they were getting the next big defensive superstar. He had the size, the speed, the swagger, the total package. But now, out of nowhere, he's packing his bags. From what's being whispered around league circles, and let's be honest, these whispers are sounding louder by the minute. This deal went down fast. Like lightning fast. One of those late-night calls where the general managers are still awake, staring at the ceiling, knowing they've got to make something happen before the deadline. Sources close to the situation are calling it a last-hour move, which tells you everything. That means the Dolphins and the mystery team. Yes, we're calling them that for now. We're probably in negotiations all day, maybe even longer, and then boom, a few signatures later, and Phillips is gone. Now, if you're a Dolphins fan, this one's got to sting. Because even though Phillips has had his share of injuries, he's been the kind of player who flashes greatness every time he steps on the field. When he's healthy, he's a menace. Long arms, insane burst off the edge, that relentless motor that coaches drool over. And under Vic Fangio's defensive system, he was supposed to thrive. But something must have shifted inside that building. Maybe it's money. Maybe it's locker room tension. Maybe it's the front office looking at the roster and thinking, we can't pay everybody. Because remember, they've got to deal with Tua's contract, Tyreek Hill's massive deal, and Jalen Waddle's extension looming too. That's a lot of money flying around South Beach. But here's where it gets interesting. You know how the NFL works. Nothing is ever simple. The rumor mill is already churning with speculation about where Phillips might be heading. Some insiders are hinting at a possible move to an AFC rival, which would be spicy, to say the least. Imagine Phillips lining up against his old team twice a year. The drama would be unreal. Others are saying an NFC powerhouse swooped in with an offer that was just too good to refuse. Maybe a high draft pick or a proven veteran who fills a desperate need for the Dolphins. Whatever the case, it's clear Miami didn't just give him away. There's got to be something significant coming back in return. Now, let's talk timing, because that's what really makes this trade pop. We're deep into the season, teams are battling for playoff position, and the Dolphins are right in the thick of it. So why pull the trigger now? That's the million-dollar question. Some analysts are saying this could be a shake-up move, a message from the front office that nobody's untouchable. Others think it's simply cap-related, a move to create flexibility before the offseason. And there's a third theory floating around that's honestly kind of juicy. Maybe Phillips himself wanted out. There have been whispers, quiet ones, about frustration with how he's been used, about wanting a bigger role, or even a fresh start somewhere else. And if that's true, this trade might have been brewing for a while. Still, it's hard not to think about what could have been. Phillips was supposed to be the guy to anchor that Dolphins defense for the next decade. He had that swagger, that South Florida vibe, the kind of player who fit right into the Dolphins' new identity. Fast, flashy, fearless. You could see it in how the fans embraced him, how the teammates hyped him up after every big sack. So for the Dolphins to move on, it means they've reached a point where they believe the return outweighs the potential. That's a big gamble, especially when you're chasing a playoff spot and your defense has been, let's say, inconsistent at times. But man, you've got to admire the drama of it all. Because if there's one thing the NFL never fails to deliver, it's the element of surprise. Every season has that one blockbuster move that shifts the energy, that makes you rethink the balance of power. And this might be that move. Phillips isn't just some rotational guy, he's a statement player. And now that statement belongs to another team. Imagine what that locker room must have felt like when the news broke. Teammates scrolling through their phones, seeing the alert, and thinking, no way, not JAELAN. Those are the moments that remind you the NFL isn't just a business. It's an emotional roller coaster for everyone involved. And here's something else to think about. How will Phillips himself respond? He's got that chip-on-the-shoulder energy already, the kind of mindset that feeds off doubt. You trade a guy like that, and you better believe he's circling the next time he faces his old team. You can almost hear it now, post-game interviews with that subtle grin, that no hard feelings, but I had to prove a point tone. That's classic NFL revenge arc material right there. And if there's one thing we know about JAELAN Phillips, it's that he doesn't shy away from proving people wrong. Meanwhile, the Dolphins will have to answer some tough questions. They'll say all the right things at the press conference. You know how it goes. We appreciate everything JAELAN did for this organization. It was a tough decision. We believe this move positions us better for the future. But behind those polished statements, there's always more to the story. Maybe the coaching staff wanted a different type of player. Maybe they weren't happy with his recovery timeline after his Achilles injury. Maybe they saw an opportunity and just couldn't let it pass. Whatever it is, it's a bold move that's going to define the narrative for the Dolphins for the rest of the season. And the fans? Oh, they're going to have opinions. Social media is already on fire with reactions, shock, anger, confusion, disbelief. Dolphins Twitter is a war zone right now, with half the fan base saying this is a mistake they'll regret, and the other half trying to trust the process. But that's the beauty of this league, right? Every big move becomes a debate. Every decision sparks 1,000 takes. And you can bet the talking heads will have a field day tomorrow morning. Every sports show, every podcast, every YouTube channel, they'll all be dissecting this one from every possible angle. At the end of the day, though, trades like this remind us why we love football in the first place. It's unpredictable. It's messy. It's emotional. It's human. Behind every transaction, there's a player with dreams, a front office with strategy, and a fan base that just wants to win. JAELAN Phillips might be heading into a new chapter, but his story's far from over. And for the Dolphins, well, they've just made a move that's going to echo through the rest of this season and maybe even beyond. So yeah, call it a last-minute deal, call it a shocker, call it whatever you want. But one thing's for sure, JAELAN Phillips getting traded isn't just another transaction. It's a full-blown NFL moment, the kind that makes you refresh your feed just to make sure it's real. Because when a player like that changes teams out of nowhere, it's not just news, it's a ripple through the entire league. And tonight, that ripple just hit Miami hard. That's a wrap for today's dive. If you're loving the content, share it with a fellow Dolphins fan, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a splash. Fins up.